ICQ Podcast episode 359, Teaching Ham Radio Classes. Well, hello fellow amateur ham radio enthusiasts to this, our 359th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M0MNG is joined by Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode, Dan KB6 November Uniform advises us about teaching ham radio classes. Well, as always, it's your very kind and generous donations that keeps the ICQ podcast advert free. And this episode, to say, we'd like to thank again our monthly and subscription donors that provide us a base for paying our way and paying our bills on the internet. You can help out too, very, very simply. What we ask you to do is to think about the value you found from the show, turn that into a monetary value, and then visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where you can send that value to us. And I say everything you send goes for paying our bills and keeps us advert free on the show. So more importantly, we're going to get on with said show as we join Martin, Leslie, Dan, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including license fees going up and down and contesters aging. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to episode 359 of the ICQ podcast and this episode's News Roundtable. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Good evening, Martin. Delighted to be here, even though I've had a few pranks.
Oh no, you're not a well man at the moment, are you?
No, I'm armless. It's I had an argument with a railway line and broke my arm, unfortunately. But it's on the mend, so don't worry.
Yeah, the railway line won, I take it.
Yes. Any sort of rumour that I had to use super glue is well, it's not true at all, actually.
Yeah. I will start another rumour, don't you worry about that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Moving the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Dan Ramczyk KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, gents.
And sorry last time. I know you tried to make the podcast, but I didn't spot you. You said you couldn't make it, and then last minute you could, and I didn't spot your email.
My bad.
No, but I didn't spot the email, so apologies. Yeah, Dan hasn't fallen out with us, so you're quite safe, guys. Back in the UK, we've got Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody. And unusually for my location on the south coast, there is a thunderstorm going on right above me, so if you hear any rumbles in the background or if I suddenly disappear, that's the reason.
You know why it's rumbling, don't you? I'm going on holiday tomorrow. It's been gorgeous weather all week. I'm going on holiday tomorrow. It's going to be horrible. Anyway, that's life. And moving over to Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to be back in the old group again.
Yeah, it was good to have you back. And as I say, your colleague Karen did extremely well last episode, and I think she thoroughly enjoyed it, and we thoroughly enjoyed her company, so that was a win-win.
Yep.
Right, let's start with our news stories. The ARRL respond to the story of a radio amateur told to remove his antenna. Now, this is the gentleman that we covered in the last episode regarding interference to an insulin pump. Dan, your side of the world, what do you think?
Well, I'm really glad the ARRL weighed in on this. That's to me part of their job, and that story really just bugged me from the beginning because there's so much missing information there. There was no talk of when the thing was manufactured at first, and did the user check her operation of the pump against the radio amateurs laws. It's just a whole bunch of misinformation. So it's at least good to hear the ARRL weigh in and try and make some sense of it.
Yeah, I think the problem is our hobby's visual. If you go put up a couple of big antennas on your plot, or whatever antenna you got up, people spot them, and we're visual. That's the problem. So we're the easy target. If anything goes wrong, we're the easy target, I'd suggest. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Dan. I'm glad the ARRL's got involved. I'm not sure about the information on the internet. It's not as complete, and we're just getting a snowball of out of date information. I'm not 100% on this, but Dan is correct. The thing is with the ARRL and other national societies, they deal with this interference problems, EMC problems all the time. They know what to do. Yeah, they've got a set procedures. They lay those procedures down, and they know how to deal with these things. Disputes with neighbours are not good, and it requires diplomacy sometimes, and also it needs sometimes a third party to come in and help out. So yeah, I'm glad they've got involved, and give the gentleman some expert advice on how to progress on this. And you're also right as well, because we put up antennas, people say, oh, that's causing X, Y, and Z, and that's not necessarily so. Most radio amateurs, 99.99% of radio amateurs are responsible. They do things in the right manner, and yeah, I just hope it's all sorted.
Yeah, me too. Now, Edmund, before you get cut off with that thunderstorm, what's your thoughts?
Well, I listened to the discussion in the last episode with great interest, and my first three thoughts upon hearing this news story were: one, it raises more questions than it answers. Two, I would lay good money that it's got nothing to do with the radio amateur. And three, wouldn't it be ironic if it turned out that the person with the large antennas was a non-licensed shortwave listener who just enjoyed listening to the broadcast bands, for example. And I suppose this is a good example of why it pays to keep an open mind, because this lady possibly did herself a disservice once she made up her mind that the radio amateur was wholly and exclusively responsible, because by pursuing that route, she instead wasn't taking that time and effort to pursue the real cause. That was a big flash. There might be a big bang in a few seconds. She wasn't spending time and effort pursuing the real cause of her problems. So, yeah, the only thing that I was wondering, which I think Ed has the answer to, is if all of this was going on 2 years ago, why has it only hit the headlines now? But beyond that, I can't really think of anything to add, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, okay, Edmund. Yeah, I agree with most of what everybody's said so far. Ed, last words on this one?
Yeah, okay. As Edmund just said, this actually all happened 2 years ago, which means this amateur's been off the air for the last 2 years for no good reason. The victim in this story is not the lady with the insulin pump, it's the radio amateur who has been discriminated against. We were discussing this before we started the recording. Of course, it could be an elderly gentleman, the radio amateur, who doesn't want to create any trouble or get into any fights, which is why, yes, as we've said, a third party coming in like the ARRL makes a lot of sense to try and get a good resolution out of this for both parties. The other thing that the ARRL report has said is that, in fact, the device used by the lady, that series of devices, or any insulin pump, is actually controlled and managed by the FDA. And the rules from the FDA on this equipment is that it has to be able to operate and be protected by the equipment itself from anything in the environment, including RF. So if RF was getting in, which seems unlikely, it's actually the fault of the equipment, not the fault of the person creating the RF, according to the FDA. So always round, the amateur is definitely not to blame for this. And the ARRL expert were also pointed out that, as I said, that range of, or that model of insulin pump was known to have faults to cause these kinds of problems. Nothing to do with EMC or RFI, purely a fault in the device itself. Now, only a limited range of the serial numbers had that problem, and as we don't have enough information and the ARRL have not been able to get the information about the serial number of the pump, we can't confirm that it was one of the ones that the FDA knew was had listed as being faulty, needing replacement by the manufacturer. Again, not enough information to make anything conclusive. However, this involvement of the ARRL and their reports so far definitely points to the problem not being the radiometer. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we've never found out either is this poor gentleman stopped transmitting. Did the problem go away? You know, it's all very easy to point that finger at us.
Yeah, well, the lady refused to do that test.
Which I thought was very telling.
Yeah, she probably already realised she got it all wrong and then didn't want to do anything.
And no one contacted the manufacturer either. Why didn't anyone contact the manufacturer?
Yeah, the so-called expert that the community group employed 2 years ago to look at this, who came back and said it could be RF, should have contacted the manufacturer.
Right.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think this has been an interesting discussion story. I'm going to throw one quick one in, which is not really related, but you mentioned the word expert, Ed. Definition of expert. X is a has-been, and spurts a drip under pressure. So I'd never want to be called an expert.
Hey, you know, actually, the consultant was a licensed radio amateur.
All right, I'll let him off a little bit. Well, no, I won't. He should have known better. Sorry, I'm not going to stand down on that one. He should have known better. Come on. HF affecting 2.4 gigs in his dreams. Right, let's move to the next news story. And I know this is one that, once again, Dan, you're quite passionate about, so I put it in. But the ARRL board establishes a program to cover the initial FCC licensing fee for young applicants. And now, I know you think this was a good one, Dan, so we'll run with it. We've spoken a couple of times, but they've actually now come up with a method.
Yeah, and so this is great. You know, they'll cover the $35. The only kind of one hitch here is that the youth has to take the test with a ARRL-VE, but that's fair. And they've reduced the test fee to $5 from $15. So yeah, altogether that's pretty good. I'm going to renew my pledge that I made a couple of months ago and say I'll pay the $35 for anybody, but I'm going to put a condition on it. They'll have to have used my study guide to study for the test.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
So yeah, there you go. It's free. They can download it for free, so I'm not making any extra money off it. But so anyway, I'm going to renew my offer as well. So there you go.
Yeah, and I know we don't advertise. We do promote our own, but we don't advertise. I only wish when I did my 3 amateur US licenses, I'd have used your book, Dan, because I think it would have made my life a lot easier. However, I got through the 3 of them, but they are good books, and this is not an advert. This is a definite recommendation of Dan's product. Right. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, there's probably not a lot I can add, except, yeah, so good on them. They said they were going to do this, and this story's come out because it's now got approval by the board. So it was proposed by one of the regional representatives of the RRL a while ago. So we knew this was coming, and now they've basically said, yep, we'll approve it, it's all good. And apparently, when this was approved on the board, there was cheers went up. That's how happy they were with doing this to support young amateurs and young new amateurs. And this combined with the delay of the fees being implemented to be in sometime next year means that a few people will get in before, and the other younger people, perhaps, if they can only get around to taking their tests next year, if they take it through the ARRL VEC, they'll have a reduced exam session fee, and the ARRL will pick up the application fee.
So all in all, good news. Good news.
Good news.
Yeah. Edmund, you got thoughts on this one?
So is this a blanket, non-means tested subsidy that turns on a person's age and nothing else? So have I got that right?
I think pretty much, yeah.
That's my understanding.
So you could be a son or a daughter of millionaires, but if you were young enough, you would automatically get the subsidy.
Under 25, I think, is the age break.
Well, obviously I'm all for encouraging people to become radio amateurs, and specifically active radio amateurs. And I think I've said before, personally, I would rather have 3 new licensees who actually went on the air and did stuff than 300 who passed the exam and you then never heard of ever again. But leaving that aside, yes, okay, that's fair enough. But as I've said, if I was a older person, maybe a pensioner, for whom $35 would be rather a lot of money, who wanted to become a radio amateur, and a young kid across the street with ostensibly very wealthy parents benefited from the payment of this on their behalf, so it cost them nothing, purely by virtue of their age and no other reason, I think I would have a view on that. But what's the answer? I don't know. I do know from my job that people will quite readily say that they're in hardship and that they need, money sooner rather than later. But then when you say to them, okay, rather than just taking a word for us, send us a copy of your bank account, let us see the incomings and the outgoings so that we have evidence of your expenditure rather than just taking a word for it, people will then suddenly become a lot more hesitant to pursue it. So if the ARRL says, yes, we'll pay this for you subject to you meeting certain conditions, I suspect the uptake will be quite low. If it's a non-means tested, everybody gets it just by virtue of being young, then I suspect the uptake will be a lot higher.
I believe from listening to one of the RRL broadcasts that the person who will get the rebate would need to be proposed by one of the VE examiners. So they will actually know the person, see the person and say, look, this is a youngster, he hasn't got $35 to spare, can we please put him into the scheme? So I don't think it will be that every single person gets the money whether they want it or not. It actually has to be put forward. But putting a means test in place would be a nightmare to manage, if even legal. So I believe that there's actually a filtering there, if you like, based on the actual examiner saying, yeah, this kid should get it.
Yeah, I think means testing is a real problem, personally. Yeah, I have feelings on this. I might have made my feelings on another podcast when we've discussed this. Leslie, last words on this one?
Well, I'm a treasurer of a local club, and anything that's about spending money, I normally shake and go into it. But anyway, that apart from to one side, I think this is about encouraging young amateur radios into the hobby. Yeah, Edmund's made some good points, but okay, let's just do it. Even if we did at this local club, I would say yes. I think it's a good idea. And the cheer went up. Well, they got a cheer here as well. Good on them. I think it's a good move. Cheers.
Okie dokie. Well, as I say, it's not everybody's going to agree. That's what makes life interesting.
Of course not. Of course not. We're all entitled to our views.
Yeah.
One other thing I should mention as well is Edmund mentioned about outgoings and incomings. Well, actually, I do that on a daily basis with my own account, so I can show to the penny what I've got. That's what I do. So.
Yeah, can I just clarify? I'm not against
Yes.
what the ARRL is doing on principle. I'm just mindful that once you start offering concessions to one group of people arbitrarily by age in this example, you could then find yourself on a slippery slope with other groups of people who consider that they also are a special case or are deserving.
Yeah.
And I say again, if I were a 65, 70-year-old person who was retired and had more time on my hands to do amateur radio potentially compared to a young person who was still going through their studies, if I barely had a couple of dollar bills to rub together that I really wanted to become involved in amateur radio, I would have to pay the $35, and yet the young person over the road who perhaps, and my perception may be wrong, but perhaps I might perceive as being able to afford and possibly easily afford $35, and that person gets it paid by the ARRL for no better reason or no other reason than they happen to be young, I think my nose would probably be put quite out of joint by that. That's the only point I'm making. I'm not ideologically against what the ARRL are doing. I'm just mindful it could upset other groups who may consider themselves equally deserving.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, Edmund, I fit the 65 to 70 bracket, and I've got to renew my licence in the States next month, I think it is. And you know what? It's a life choice. Yeah, even if you're never not loaded with money, it's a life choice. My life, I can either have a few bottles of a couple of bottles of whiskey, or a few bottles of beer, or my ARRL license for another 10 years. I choose how to spend my money the way I want to spend it. And it really does come down to that. You know, people have, in my opinion, you know, whereas there are hardship cases, the majority of the time people have got to decide where they want to spend their money and go from that way, I would suggest. Anyway, we'll be here all night arguing this one, I think. But
of course we will.
yeah. Go one, Dan. And I'm not upset with the ARRL doing this, quite honestly. I have different feelings on it, but hey hum, there it is. Moving to Germany, the DARC reports that the regulator, and I'll hopefully get this right, Ed, BNets A has announced amateur radio new fees from October, and that's a reduction, isn't it, Ed?
Yep, that's right. We've just talked about getting a rebate, or the ARRL paying for some of the fees in America. In Germany, the BNetzA, the Federal Network Agency, the regulator, has just simply cut the prices across the board by quite major amounts. It used to cost something in the order of 150, 160 euros to take your test and get your first license. But now talking about, depending whether it's the novice license, which is like the equivalent of the intermediate license in the UK, the middle one, that's about 75 euros cheaper now, and the full license is 90 euros cheaper. Makes a major difference to the overall cost. So good on BNetzA. There's another thing here mentioned, a training call sign can also be ordered, purchased for just 22 euros. That was 70, I know that because I've got one. The way it works in Germany, it's not like in other countries where you can have somebody use your call sign under your control. If they are not licensed, they have to use a training call sign which starts with the letters Delta November. So, but the training call sign is actually a one-time charge. It's basically for the paperwork for them. But across the board, they've slashed the prices, and that you don't see very often. So that's really quite nice, a nice surprise for the radio amateurs in Germany and the radio amateurs to be in Germany. So test fees and the actual license fees as well, all reduced, which is good because I pay the license fee every year as well. So for both my German and my Australian one, the UK one's free at the moment. So, yeah, well done, BNetSA. Again, this is the agency that we keep saying well done to for tracking down interference cases quickly and sorting them out. They're actually a very good agency.
Yeah, I'll give you that, Ed. No problems at all. And yeah, but it's interesting. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Oh, well, I don't have any thoughts in particular. I just wondered if Ed, the other Ed, DD5LP, knows A, what prompted this, and B, what prompted this now rather than at any other moment.
Purely the annual review of the BNetSA. They look at all of the fees every year about this time. By all the fees, I mean also for the commercial organisations. And they have a review. And for whatever reason, and I don't have any names to compliment on going to them and saying reduce it, they've purely looked at it and gone, we're charging too much, and reduced it.
Okay, I just hope that a reduction in...
There are a lot of amateurs that work for BNetSA, by the way.
Okay, well, I just hope then that the reduction in fees doesn't result in an equivalent reduction in the good works that the BNetSA have been doing up till now that Martin has hinted at there. But
I doubt it, because that's actually defined to them in the contract from the government. So they can't get out of their responsibilities by saying we don't get as much money from the amateurs, so we can't give them that service. The service they give is for commercial radio and amateur radio and TVs, and believe it or not, the railway, for some reason, is part of the same organisation. That's all defined in legal documents with them. That hasn't been changed as far as I know.
oh, there's good news all round then.
Yeah, they've just looked at it and gone, we're getting all this money from these amateurs, and like I said, we don't know for sure. I suspect the reduction's been put forward by one of the employees who just happens to be a radio amateur. That would be my guess, but we don't know.
Right. Well, Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts, it's good news. Every year you see organisations put their prices up, and you sort of, I'll be the first in line to grumble, but when somebody does it the other way, take it, people. Be happy.
I thought it was kind of funny that we were being skeptical about something good here.
Well, no. Normally being British and that, we're normally cynical and all the rest of it. In this particular case, no. They've knocked the price down. Say thank you. Great.
Well, I sit back here, Dan, and you can comment on what this. But when I took all three of my American exams on the same day. You sat down and you did your technician. If you passed your technician, would you like to do general? Yeah. So sit down, you passed the general. Would you like to do the extra? Yeah. Sit down, did that. And I paid one examination fee. I took 3 exams and they only charged me for one. And then, albeit I have to pay for my license in the States, but $35 for 10 years. That's, $3.5 a year. And $3.50 in UK money is about £3. It's nothing.
It wouldn't even buy you a pint of Guinness.
That is true. So I think although the American system, when you look at the overall, I know the UK, we get our licenses now for free, but we pay almost, I think it's well in the £30 for a full license, but you pay for every exam you take. So overall, I think, you get good value for money. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I agree. I think so too. My question is what's the term of the license? Like how much do you pay per year?
What, in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK.
Nothing.
No, in Germany.
Yeah, it is a yearly license, as it is in Australia as well, and it's at the moment I think it's €70. I should know. I've just paid it. No, hang on, might be €56.
But every year.
Yeah, every year.
Oh,
every
that's
year.
Something.
And the Australian one's about the same.
Well, so I can certainly see then where they would be able to reduce the fee since it's so high to begin with.
It's more the fee for the exams that they've reduced rather than the license fee. They've done a bit of both, but it's mainly the exam fees and things.
Oh, I see.
My commercial license, I think, is £80 for 5 years, something like that.
Oh, and by the way, in Germany, the exams are still run by the regulator, not by amateur groups.
Right. So I kind of got that from.
It's like four times a year in different parts of the country.
Okay. Well, good.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting things that come out of the last two discussions on licensing. Going to move to our last news story tonight. This was one that our Frank K4FMH has written, and he's just done a study on contesters, and they are aging. And in fairness, I did SSB field day at the weekend. There were probably about 9 people turned up, and I think 6 of them were over 50, and probably at least 5 of them were over 60. So we are aging. Leslie, you've done a similar study. What do you think?
I did it many years ago for another organisation that will remain totally nameless, but what we found was exactly what Frank was saying. The age group was moving. I think it was the age group was increasing 1 year every 2. I know Frank, he does his stuff in a very scientific manner, very objectively, and my guess is he would be spot on with what he's done. In this particular case, would radio amateurs accept that? I suggest they're not, even when the age group of the local club is like, I think we've got 1 youngster in now, but certainly, the gist of what Frank is saying, I would say is correct.
Yeah. So what Frank is saying is effectively the average age of contesters in the year 2000 compared with now. Now the average age is 15 years higher. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, my initial reaction to this was, I resemble that remark. I talked with Frank a little bit about this. There's a couple of things here. So first, a lot of this is CW contesters and single sideband cons. I think a lot of the newer folks are using things like FT8 and may not even be contesters, much less get on HF. So it might be easy to generalize from this that amateur radio operators are getting older, which we probably are. It may not be as bad as Frank's study makes out, which brings us to actually another point, is that we need a better survey of the hobby as a whole. And Frank and I talked a little bit about this, and we have in the past, and we did again when he did this study. But to me, that's really what I think we need in ham radio, is somebody to do a really comprehensive study about who's getting into ham radio, why are they getting into ham radio, what are they doing in ham radio, all that kind of stuff, and what age they are. So this is only a little glimpse into a part of the hobby. So don't take it as that. Don't generalize too much.
Yeah. But as I say, certainly looking around me at SSB Field Day, and I'm in my late 60s myself, and I wasn't the oldest, but I weren't far off it. But it does seem that things got older. And the other thing I found is that the youngsters, when they turn up, they don't seem to have the drive or the knowledge to facilitate things. They'll turn up, operate and disappear, but they won't necessarily help unless you badger them to, I need your help to hold that mast while I take it down or whatever. That just doesn't enter into their head, I think. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, I've somebody in his 40s and somebody who doesn't do contests, I'd like to plead the fifth, please. However, a hypothetical die-hard anti-contester might think to themselves, ooh, fewer contesters equals fewer contests, which equals less domination of contests at weekend on the non-walk band. Goody, goody, goody. Discuss.
Yeah, what you're saying is the less contesters equals more happiness.
Well, let's just say that during SFB Field Day, I had quite a good time on 17 metres.
Look, contests aren't my bag either. I don't play that. But one thing you were mentioning, Martin, and I've got to say this: there's a thing called it's not necessarily the youngsters, and I'll sort of pick up on that. There's a thing called the Pareto Rule, which means that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And you can apply that through life, and you can apply it through radio clubs as well. When things have got to be taken down, people disappear. I've got you so used to it now, but that's what happens.
Certainly does. Anyway, last words on this one, Ed, because I'm sure you were out. Well, I know you were out doing some contesting that weekend. Maybe not SSB Field Day, but some contesting.
Yep, shock horror. Last weekend I was taking part in the contest, but to my defence it was a completely different contest because it was the Portable Operations Challenge. But what was interesting was the other two major contests that were on. That was the IARU Region 1 Field Day, of which the RSGB SSB Field Day fits into as well, as in similar rules, similar whatever. And more importantly though, the All Asia contest. And the reason I say that's interesting is because the exchange in the All Asia contest was your age, not the serial number, not a Maidenhead locator, your age. And worked a few stations in there just to get some points for my contest, and it was interesting to find that there were people there up to, I think that the highest one I got was 88 or 89, and I'm already a pensioner as well, so most of them were older than I was. So I'd be interested to talk with Frank at some point to ask whether his statistics for the contesters getting older was a problem is only in the contesting part, or it's true across the whole amateur radio community. I know his data is only related to contesters, but it's an interesting question. Are we really looking at the amateur radio hobby getting a lot older? Although at the moment we're hearing about a lot more younger people getting in. So yeah, I think I agree with Dan on this. We need to have a complete survey. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, we certainly do. And the All Asia was on at the same time. We actually worked China from the UK. And the Chinese man went, "You're not in my contest, go away."
I worked Japan.
Yeah, we had Japan as well.
20 watts and a wire antenna.
Yeah, we had Japan as well. And, yeah, and I also, I actually heard New Zealand as well. So sounds like the bands are going to take off soon. So that's well, there are some advantages to contesting, but even if they won't work here, knowing full well that you've actually had their contact with them, although they won't give you details. China was the first for me, so I was pleased with that. Right, that's the end of our news stories. Let's find out what the guys have been up to. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Yes, Martin. Well, what have I been up to? Well, apart from damaging myself with the accident, we've been with last weekend, it was with the Silverthorne Radio Club in Lambourne End. And we had HF going, we had our barbecue going, we had a lady come along do all the food for us. Absolutely lovely, and I thank her so much for doing that. Who else did we have along? We had a chap called Robert Kearney from the Felix Stone and District Amateur Radio Society, and we looked after him grandly. And it was a wonderful time. We didn't have too many antennas up because, we're slowly getting out of the COVID thing. so we were short on numbers, but it was a grand weekend, and I really, really enjoyed it. So, I've been pottering about with my little antenna while I've got sort of off work. I've been trying to work through my antenna analyzer manual, trying to work out some of the things I didn't understand about it before. But that's what I've been getting up to, Martin. What can one say? Just pottering about, really.
Yeah, that sounds like you've been having fun, and let's say if you were out for field day, that's even better. Dan, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, you chided Edmund on going to lighthouses. I went to one myself. The week of the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend, drove out to a town here called Port Huron, and they have the Lightship Huron docked just outside the park, right on Lake Huron, and had a great time. And it just so happened, one of the reasons actually I went is that the Eastern Michigan Amateur Radio Club was having their annual cookout that same day in that park, and so I enjoyed some radio operation as well as some camaraderie and bratwurst with the Eastern Michigan Amateur Radio Club.
Well, that sounds good. I'll tell you about my lighthouse in a minute, but let's hear what Edmund's got to say. What have you been up to, Edmund?
Well, for family reasons, I didn't take part in the Portable Operations Challenge this year, which means that somebody else in the ICQ podcast has the opportunity of taking the ICQ podcast crown for that event this year. Didn't take part in that, nor the IARU Region 1 SSB Field Day, nor the All Asia contest, nor the 2 metre 24-hour contest thing that was on last weekend. So if anybody's worried about contesters and contests dying off, I think reports of their demise have been rather exaggerated based on last weekend. But instead of contests, it's been special event stations. So, like Dan, I also took part in the International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend on the 3rd weekend in August. And this year, in contrast to 2020, I went back both days and did quite well. I think about 80-something contacts all told, most of them on 40 metres SSB. And that went really, really well in all respects. I've received a nice shortwave listener QSL card from a station near Munich, who I'm going to reply to, and off the back of a contact with a lighthouse in France, I've now established contact via social media with a French amateur radio operator, who I'm going to correspond with because I think we have similar interests. Other than that, the International Air Ambulance Week is on at the moment and finishes on the Sunday when this podcast is released. So if anybody's listening to this on the day of release, in the UK or in Europe, if you're around on Sunday afternoon or early evening maybe, then have a listen on 40 metres, and you might hear Golf Bravo 0 Kilo Sierra Sierra GB0 Kent Surrey Sussex, which is me operating mainly on 40 metres probably. But I think despite propagation having been a bit hit and miss recently, propagation is definitely there if you're in the right place at the right time. I've homebrewed a 17 metre monoband inverted V dipole fed in the centre by kayaks with a 1-to-1 balun, and the wire for that came out of a length of 13 amp mains cable that I bought at a car boot sale a couple of weekends back. I just chopped it down the middle, and the neutral wire is one leg of the dipole and the live wire is the other leg of the dipole, and using that just on a pole in my front garden this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, managed to work a station in East Tennessee using SSB. So propagation is definitely on the up a bit, even though I think it's a case of needing to be in the right place at the right time. And congratulations, Martin, on getting through to China, because that's something I've never done. on any band or any modes. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you've been really busy, Edmund. And as I say, yeah, it was a shame when the Chinese man went no, but never mind. At least we had the contact, even if he didn't want to give me didn't want to take points off me. Ed, you were busy at the weekend, I assume.
Yeah. First of all, let me set off and say congratulations to Edmund on the support he gives every year to the International Air Ambulance Week, and good luck with getting a few more contacts there from the GB0 call sign, and well done on that effort, because it's certainly a cause that needs to be advertised and promoted, being as they are not paid for by the government, but rather by donations. So well done there. Coming to the Lighthouse Weekend that everybody commented on, I was actually travelling out to the Bavarian forest that weekend with the wife and the dog, and expecting to spend 5 lovely days activating SOTA summits. Of the 5 days we were out there, 4 of the days were constant rain from morning till night. We actually came home a day early. That was a real washout in every term, so that was not the best of things this year. The other thing we've already mentioned, yes, I was involved in the Portable Operation Challenge, and we'll see how well we did in that, but thanks for Edmund for standing aside. I mean, I probably wouldn't have had a lot of chance if he'd been entering again this year, but we'll see anyway. I hope I don't win the ICQ thing, because it's me that does all the paperwork for it. So I'd like to give it to somebody else rather than take it myself. And a thing that I've actually started just the last couple of days, we've mentioned, or I've mentioned on ICQ podcast previously, the OpenRD77 firmware updates for several DMR handy talkies. And they've brought out a new version, and this latest version is really quite nice. It's got everything you need for satellites built into it, so that you actually load the KEP files, which tells you where the satellites are, into the logic inside the handy talkie. And when there's a satellite coming over, not only does it tell you it's coming over, it shows you roughly what the path is. It gives you a signal strength meter. It sets the frequency of receive and transmit and adjusts them for Doppler. And, talk about making it easy to work a satellite. I've got the software in there. I've configured my location in there, because you have to put your lat long in and the date and time. But that's all you have to do. So if anybody's got either an RD77 or a Baofeng RD5R or the 1801 or the other ones that are supported, these are basically the sub £100, sub $100, sub €100 DMR handy talkies. This software that's done by an open group that's free, it really makes the radio quite impressive, and you've now got features in there that the more expensive handy talkies don't have. So I shall be playing with that over the next week or so, and maybe it's something I'll comment on the next time I'm back on the ICQ podcast in a month's time. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, maybe you need to be doing a feature on that one, because I'm sure on our Phil down in Australia, he will download this Sunday afternoon, listen to it on his way to work, and just as he's getting to work, he's probably now thinking, I better find that software. So, sorry, Phil, but I know what you're like. We do talk fairly regularly.
Yeah, sorry, Martin. Let me just jump in. It's OpenGD77, not RD. My mistake.
OpenGD.
GD, Golf Delta. Yeah.
77. Okay, I might have a look at that one myself and see what's what. Right, what have I been up to? Well, as mentioned earlier, I was out with Sutton and Cheam Amateur Radio Society doing field day. I had every intention of taking part in the Portable Ops Challenge, and I left the field. It was about 20 miles away, drove home, sat down with a cup of tea, about to then decide to operate in one of the slots. sat down with my cup of tea and promptly fell asleep. Yeah, when I woke up, the slot has passed and my tea was cold, but hey, that's life. So I apologise to Frank on that one already, Ed, as you well know. What I did enjoy, though, was when I actually got back to SSB Field Day, I had the operating time of 4 in the morning till 8 in the morning. And when I got there, they said to me, "Oh, we haven't got you a logger. What are you going to do?" And I went, "Okay." So I decided to operate on my own, and I actually connected up my BHI speaker. And I was surprised just how well the BHI speaker worked. I was phenomenally surprised. I know I've used it before, and I really sing its praises. It's the little mobile-looking speaker. It's a reasonable amount of money, but God, was it worth it? I was picking things out on the contest that there was no way I was ever going to pick out. So I was really, really pleased on that one. What else I do? Digital modes. Well, I now have a hotspot in my car. So at stupid o'clock in the morning this week, when I've been going to work, I've been putting calls out at I leave for work 5 o'clock UTC. 4 o'clock UTC, 5 o'clock local at the moment until the clocks change. And yeah, it's there's nobody been around, but I've been putting calls out. I have work people at that hour in the morning, so there are people on. I put various calls out throughout the day. The digital stats are on the website for the talk group. Just quickly, we now have 32 countries through the talk group, have connected through the talk group. 9 more IDs appeared last month, just under 3,000 connections, and 2 more countries, to making it 32. So things are going quite well there. Did manage to break, and I'm not sure how, my 2m77's antenna. It snapped. I think part of it was a Comet antenna, but part of it was plastic, and I think the UV got to it and it just snapped on the plastic bit. I think I might be able to get away with a bit of epoxy glue and glue it back together. And Lighthouse is on the air. I was winding our Edmund up the other day, and I said, I worked at Lighthouse. I worked at Lighthouse in Western Australia. And it really? Yeah, through the talk group. I spoke to Phil Hickingbottom, VK6ADF, at his Lighthouse activation. So, all right, it was through the ICQ podcast talk group, but we still have one with him. So there you go. And some of you may catch me over the weekend. This podcast is released as MI1MRB. I'm having a couple of days in Belfast. So there you go. So that's what I've been up to. So I think we've all been pretty busy. Right, I'd like to thank Leslie for joining me, and Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Thanks for inviting me, Martin. It was great.
Yeah, great. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
All right. Well, thanks for having me again, Martin. It's been great to be back on the show.
That's great. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
That's good, mate, as always. And Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP, who hasn't been demoted to this group because Karen made such a good job in the last one. Honest, Ed.
Yeah, right. Who proposed Karen for the other one? I did. Yeah, and you proved something wrong as well. Look, we can get on with 2 Eds on the show.
Yeah, we all get on as a big family anyway, so yeah. They know that. Right, I'll say 73 to you all, and we'll catch you all soon. 73, guys.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time for the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. Start off here with a very kind note from David, Juliet 1, India Lima X-Ray. and David keeps an eye on news in Japan for us, lets us know what's going on. Well, he's found a news story here that about a couple of weeks ago that an amateur there called Sakai-san, I hope I pronounced that correctly, was hiking a trail about 1,000 meters above sea level when he heard a SOS frequency while trying to make QSOs. So it turns out that it was a small boat that was being moved around between two locations that had completely lost power, including its marine radio off the coast of Niigata. Say one of the guys had an amateur handheld, but was unable to make contact with the Coast Guard directly. So Sakai-san confirmed their location and situation, and as he didn't have a mobile phone signal, he relayed the information through another amateur radio operator who was able to contact the local Coast Guard, and so he was able to continue to talk to the guys, relaying the message, etc., as I say, until the Coast Guard arrived. And I say that took a whole about 6.5 hours or so. He was keeping them updated what was going on and updating them in the progress. Now, the rescue, so it took that long because it ended up that the boat was 55 kilometers from shore. So a wonderful news story from Japan about amateurs doing their bit and helping a stranded seaman at sea. So thank you very much, David, for letting us know about that wonderful news story from Japan. Next bit of news is from the UK. The RSGB has commented that they've reached 4,000 candidates passing the foundation license via remote invigilation. Now, since 2020, the Society implemented remote testing in stages for all three licenses to enable people to become more involved with the hobby despite the COVID-19 pandemic. So they've reported that also 1,241 candidates have since passed the intermediate exam, and 544 have gained their full UK amateur radio licence. So congratulations to all involved, students, teachers and invigilators for that fantastic milestone and figures that are being reported from the UK. And now I'm very pleased to welcome Vance Martin, November 3 Victor Echo Mike, who's going to provide an update on the POTA scheme for August 2021.
This is November 3 Victor Echo Mike with your month ending August 2021 Parks on the Air update. Be sure to visit parksontheair.com for more information about the program and POTA.app for spotting, park information, leaderboards, and more. And now for our monthly update. August was a very busy month for Parks on the Air. During the month, there were over 180,000 contacts made by about 1,200 different activators. They put nearly 3,000 parks on the air from 25 different DX entities, and all of those parks and entities were hunted by more than 23,000 different hunters. The top activators for the month were K7CAR with 3,399 QSOs and W0YES, who activated 72 different parks. The top hunter for the month was N5HA with 967 QSOs while hunting 691 different parks. In our POTA DX corner, Canada was unsurprisingly the most active entity outside of the continental United States, with 12,382 QSOs being made from parks in the Great White North. Not to be outdone, however, we had quite a bit of activity from Japan, Alaska, Puerto Rico, England, Wales, France, and many others. The top DX activators for the month were VE9MY with 1,579 QSOs and VE2NCG, who activated 26 parks. And this concludes our August 2021 Parks on the Air update. As always, the team at Parks on the Air wishes you safe activations and happy hunting. 73.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi, Dan KB6NU here. If you're a regular ICQ podcast listener, you know I teach a lot of ham radio classes. When the pandemic reached Michigan in February 2020, I just finished teaching a one-day tech class. My next class would have been in April, but of course, I had to cancel that class. As the pandemic dragged on, it became unclear when I'd be able to teach in person again, so I decided to try teaching online classes. I've since taught 4 online tech classes and 2 online general classes, and they worked out much better than I thought they would. In fact, teaching online has a number of advantages. First, I have a bigger reach. When teaching in person, I'm pretty much limited to about a 200-mile radius from Ann Arbor, where I live. Online, I can now teach people all across the U.S. I've had students on the East Coast, West Coast, and many states in between. Second, people that can't take a whole day to take a one-day class can attend in the evening. Instead of one long single session, my online tech classes are spread out over 4 two-hour evening sessions. Third, people that might be too shy to take classes in person can attend online. This may not seem like a big deal, but it is for some. Fourth, I don't have to find a venue. This can be a real headache, especially for first-time teachers. Fifth, I don't have to arrange for a VE team to administer the test. While my local VE team has been very responsive, I don't have to coordinate with them to find a workable date. Not surprisingly, my online classes are organized differently than the one-day classes. In person, I teach a one-day tech class. We start at 9 a.m., and I teach until 3:30 p.m., at which time the VE team comes in to give the test. Online, however, my tech class consists of 4 two-hour sessions spread over 2 weeks. Classes are held on Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a bit late for those on Eastern Time and a bit early for those on Pacific Time, but overall, it's a good compromise. The online general class consists of 8 two-hour sessions spread over 4 weeks. This format is pretty much the same as my in-person general class. The platform I use to teach online is Zoom. I considered using a free video conferencing system like Jitsi, but in the end decided that Zoom was the best choice. It's arguably the most widely used video conferencing platform, and most of your students will already have used it at some point. Choosing a text for my class was a no-brainer. I use my own no-nonsense licensed study guides. Students can download the PDF version of the text study guide for free from my website, KB6NU.com. If students prefer print or ebook versions, they can purchase them from Amazon. If you have a bunch of students that want the print version, contact me directly and I'll give you an instructor discount. Of course, other study guides, such as the ARRL study guide or the Gordon West study guide, will work just fine for an online class. If you've been using them for in-person classes, just continue to use them online. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I teach the class. When I teach one-day tech classes, I don't use PowerPoints. I think they put people to sleep. Instead, I have a collection of colored markers and make liberal use of the whiteboard. I think that drawing on the whiteboard and moving around the classroom helps keep people awake. Of course, that doesn't work online. You're not at the front of the class, but rather just another image on the student's screen. You can't move around to keep their attention. Another issue is that it's more difficult, for me at least, to write and draw legibly on a computer screen. So, what I came up with was a hybrid approach. I make up a bunch of slides that I can then draw on. To create the slides, I don't use PowerPoint, but rather a program called Sketchbook from Autodesk. This free program lets you build an image using layers. I use the layers like slides in a PowerPoint presentation, but because they're layers in a drawing, I can write over them. I use a drawing tablet from Gaumon to draw on the computer screen like I would a whiteboard in the classroom. For example, when I talk about DC circuits, one of the layers has a schematic of a simple DC circuit, consisting of a battery and a resistor. Using the drawing tablet, I show the concepts of voltage, resistance, and current, show the direction of the current and the polarity of the battery. Works great. One of the nice things about doing it this way is that I don't have to draw so much on the computer screen. The pre-drawn schematic looks much better than if I were doing it freehand, and it takes a lot less time if I were drawing everything from scratch. Now, let me give you a few tips based on my experience with teaching online classes. The first thing you should consider doing is to create a mailing list to keep in touch with students before, during, and after the classes. I use the mailing list to inform them about upcoming classes, including the dates and times and what material I plan to cover, so that they can read the appropriate chapters before class. After a class, I use the mailing list to answer questions that may have come up during the class that I didn't have a ready answer for. I also use the list to pass along other relevant information, such as where to find practice tests or how to sign up for an online test session. You could use pretty much any mailing list service such as MailChimp or Constant Contact. The service that I use is MailerLite. Because I use the site for a number of different mailing lists, I had to go with a paid option, and MailerLite was the least expensive service I could find. Another tip is to greet students when they enter the meeting. There have been studies that show when you greet online students, they tend to be more engaged with the class, and that will translate into a higher pass rate. Another tip is to tell lots of stories during class. This tip is a good one, whether you're teaching online or in person. As I'm teaching, I tell lots of stories about my ham radio experiences. For example, when I get to the questions about using snap-on ferrites for mitigating RFI, I tell the story about when I first put up a 40-meter dipole at a new QTH. I built the antenna, tuned it with an antenna analyzer, and pulled it up into the trees. I then marched down to my shack, connected it to the rig, and started calling CQ. The next thing I knew, my wife came downstairs yelling, "What the heck are you doing?" I replied that I just put up a new 40-meter dipole and was calling CQ. She said, "Well, you're opening and closing the garage door." Apparently, enough RF was getting into the wires connecting the garage door opener to the switch on the garage wall to make the opener think someone was pressing the switch. The fix was to snap a ferrite choke around the wires. This is a question I'm sure most of my students get right. Another tip is to encourage students to turn their cameras on so you can see their faces. Not everyone will want to do this, and some students may not have enough bandwidth to support video. But getting whatever visual feedback you can will help you determine if the students are getting the material or not. If you can't see their faces, make a point to ask them if they have any questions. I'll do this a dozen or more times during the class. While it's good to ask the students if they have questions, don't get bogged down or try and answer the questions too deeply. This can take a lot of time to do properly, and there's no sense slowing down the class for one student's questions. If you can't answer a student's questions quickly, offer to stay after class to answer the question more completely. Take attendance and contact students directly if they miss a class. Doing so shows that you're interested in having them succeed and encourages them to stick with it, even if they're having trouble in class. Finally, my best piece of advice is to have fun. Perhaps the best thing that you can do when teaching an online class is to show how much fun you have with ham radio and how much fun ham radio can be. If you can make the class more fun, they'll want to stick with you and not give up. If you want more information about teaching ham radio classes, please feel free to contact me directly. You'll find my email address on my website, kb6nu.com. I've also recorded one of my online tech classes, and those videos are on my YouTube channel if you want to see how I teach the class. The link to that channel will be in the show notes, as well as links to a couple of other teaching resources. Thanks for your attention. Good luck with your classes. And 73 from Dan, KB6NU.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland.
Good evening.
73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, thanks to our friend and colleague, Dan Ramczyk, KB6NU uniform, for his very kind feature on teaching amateur radio classes. And if not something that you do yourself in teaching a class, I'm sure it will give you some I suppose, appreciation for what people have done for you in the past in terms of helping you get your license, etc. So thank you, Dan, for that very kind feature. Now we've got a quick bit of feedback here, following on from the last episode number 358. We covered a news story in relation to diabetes, insulin pump, and amateur radio being involved in it. Our colleague Frank K4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, got a call from a fellow amateur and friend, a Dr. Scott Wright, Kilo 0 Mike Delta, and he said that there was a correction just need to be made, and it's that with type 1 diabetes has less threatening version and was indeed backwards. Type 1 is the more severe version than type 2. So it's Frank wanted us to make that correction on the show that Dr. Wright had let him know about. So thanks to Frank for picking up that piece of feedback from Dr. Wright, and thank you again for letting us know. Obviously, and we're happy to make that amendment so everyone is incorrect in what's going on there. Right, well, we're actually in Northern Ireland at the moment, piecing together this episode 359 of the ICQ podcast, and it's one of the very rare occasions, particularly in the last 2 years, where I'm in the same room as Father Martin M0MNG as we record this section of the podcast. So, but I know you've got updates, Dad, to tell us about the Dmr Project, and we've certainly been listening in and making a couple of calls out while we've been here in Northern Ireland. So, give us an update in what's going on with that project.
Well, the project's working very, very well. Over the last month, I put up some more stats up onto the website, and said earlier that we've had 9 more contacts or 9 more call signs through the podcast talk group this time. We've also had nearly 3,000 connections. Now, I say connections because that's the way I can monitor it. And 2 more countries, which have been very, very good. So we're now at 32 countries. I'm in Northern Ireland, and I know I shouldn't be surprised, but I've already worked Western Australia and California in the couple of calls I've put out over here. So a few people have actually worked me as MI1MRB. So if you hear me calling MI1MRB, you'll know that I'm still in Belfast. So please, with the podcast talk group, put some calls through. If we hear you, we'll come back to you.
We certainly will, as you say, so keep an eye out for them there, guys. Well, that just about wraps up the show, episode number 359. We'd just like to thank Dan, KB6NU uniform, for his very kind feature on teaching amateur radio classes. We'd also like to thank our monthly and annual subscription donors for paying our way and keeping us advert free on the ICQ podcast. If you found value in today's show, all we ask you to do is to think of a numerical number of the value you received. Visit icqpodcast.com/donate and send a donation our way, and you'll help continue to support the show and the work we're doing. And as always, we'd like to thank the guys that joined us in the news round table. So that's Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie, India, Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa. So thanks, guys, for taking part there in the news round table. Right, well, as I say, normally we wrap up the show with making Mrs. B a cup of tea and finding her a chocolate biscuit. I've also got to make my Mrs. B a cup of tea and find her a bit of breakfast, as we do this, and then we're off on the road with handhelds in the mix. So we'll be seeing what we can do to terrorise the bands and the repeaters here in Northern Ireland and see who we can work. So we're going to go have fun in the hobby for the day as we're out and about, and we hope you do too. So I'm going to bid everyone 73 and catch you in a full night's time.
Yeah, 73 all, and don't forget, Colin has a licence this part of the UK, so you will hear him on if you're in the UK.
So 73 is all, catch you in a full night's time. Bye bye.